Hi guys, so in this video I'm going to respond to a TikTok that I've seen all over kind of social media at the moment. I've seen it on Louder or Crowder, I've seen it on Paul Joseph Watson as well, so it's a pretty interesting one. It's about a bunch of vegans who are talking about white supremacy and anti-colonialism within the vegan movement, so it should be a really cool one to respond for you guys too. And definitely like and subscribe if you do, and comment down below if you like it. Anyway, let me get on with the video.
Fail to account for white supremacy and veganism, you get white veganism.
We must address the role of white supremacy and the oppression it creates, no matter if we are vegan or not.
Okay, I don't think I have to really explain this to people on the right, but when people on the far left talk about white supremacy, they're not actually talking about real white supremacy. They're, white people thinking they're superior than another race and wanting to dominate them. They're not talking about that. They're mainly complaining that there are too many white male animal rights activists, and that also there aren't enough vegans that believe in their left-wing ideology, that believe veganism should be about anti-racism. So let's go over the first point, why there are so many white male vegans. Now, the reason that I think there are so many white male vegans doing activism is the fact that men tend to be better leaders, and they also tend to be more they tend to be more able to make their voices heard. They're much more aggressive in that way, and also I feel like one of the things, particularly with being an animal rights activist or a YouTuber, is the fact that you have to be quite competitive. You have to really want to get lots of views on your videos. You have to it's the same with setting up your own business, like Earthling Ed has done. He set up his own vegan restaurant. He's done a number of animal rights movies, and in order to set up your own business, you need to be quite competitive. And I think that men are more likely to be competitive, and they're more likely to be better leaders. That's why you have a lot more male vegan activists than female vegan activists. Also, with them being white, I think that basically it's just the fact that historically the West has always been a much more rich country than other parts of the world. So we have a lot more money in the West than they do in a lot of other parts of the world, and so this has given us the opportunity to it's given us the opportunity to decide what to eat, what we do and do not want to eat. It's given us the choice to avoid harm to animals if we can. And I think that this is basically why veganism was invented in the West, why the vegan movement was invented in the West, and it's why so many people from the West are vegan, because I think that in order to think about animals and to think about things that are beyond yourself, your people need to be okay first. And that's why we have so many white vegan activists, because we're able to eat. We're able to eat what we want to eat. We're able to have enough food. And so we're able to think about more political and social issues. Okay, so the second issue is that they have with other vegans is the fact that they don't agree with them on their other political ideologies. So they don't agree with them on their anti-racist ideologies. And this isn't really an anti-racist ideology. I think it's more of a political ideology in itself. It's a political ideology which is pro-globalization, which is pro-increasing diversity targets or inserting diversity quotas. It's a kind of a political ideology which is pro-Black Lives Matter and other organisations like that. I'm not going to go into why I'm against Black Lives Matter, or why I'm against diversity quotas in general, or globalization in general, because we would be here all day. So I'm going to specifically focus on the issues of diversity quotas within the vegan movement, and also the issues of globalization within the vegan movement as well. So firstly, in terms of diversity quotas, I'm really concerned about this because there are quite a lot of animal rights organisations which use diversity quotas. So they'll basically headhunt for diverse people to join their workforce, to join the animal save movement. And I think that this is very, very negative towards, this has negative consequences on the animals. This has negative consequences on the animals because if you hire someone to be your, let's say, head accountant at, in the animal save movement, and you hire them based on the fact that they're a woman who is in a wheelchair, not based on the fact that they're the best accountant, then she may be less able to manage the money of that organisation well. And if she's less able to manage the money of that organisation well, then there'll be less posters produced for the animal save movement. There'll be less less events, less events being able to be funded. And so there'll be less opportunity to create footage which can be used in documentaries and encourage people to go vegan. And that's one of the issues that I have with certain animal rights organisations, is that they're hiring people based on their diversity, not based on their actual skills for the job. And that's detrimental for the animals because it means that we're not going to produce as good leaflets for them. We're not going to produce as many leaflets for them. And I just find that devastating. I also have an issue with immigration in terms of veganism as well. And the reason I have an issue with immigration in terms of veganism is the fact that a lot of people from other countries, such as China, for example, they're not as concerned about the environment and as concerned about animals as we are in the West. And I think it's much, much harder to get someone who is Chinese, a Chinese immigrant, to go vegan, because their culture is much less interested in animal rights than someone from the UK, or someone who has a UK culture. And so I really think that we have to educate immigrants and try and make them understand veganism. But I think it's going to be quite detrimental if we have mass immigration, because we've got people from all over the world coming into the UK. And if we have too many people from, let's say, China coming into the UK, that will basically change how people in the UK perceive animals. And if that changes how people in the UK perceive animals, and they start perceiving them like the Chinese people do, as being objects that can be exploited and then killed, then that's an issue. And that's going to mean that we're less able to convince them to go vegan. And so I think that we really need to curb immigration if we want veganism to survive, because in order for us to get the message across to people, especially immigrants, they need to be kind of integrated into British society and British culture more.
White veganism focuses solely on animal liberation while ignoring the context of colonization and imperialism and how all of this impacts all living beings and the planet.
Right, so in terms of colonialism and imperialism, this often focuses on two issues. The first one is factory workers and how they're exploited when they're producing meat. And the second one is mainly talking about how a lot of vegan products are produced with very, very bad working conditions abroad. So in terms of the fair trade argument, I completely support fair trade food, like 100%. However, I think that blaming white people for not buying fair trade food is very, very, to me, very, very misguided, because it's not just a white person's issue. If we look at somewhere like China, which produces a hell of a lot of the products that we use every day. It produces quite a lot of the tofu that we eat, and also there's quite a lot of it produces quite a lot of the tofu that we eat. It produces quite a lot of the soya as well in China. Not all of the soya, but quite a lot of the soya. So if we think about tofu being produced and vegans eating non-fair trade tofu, which I'm sure a lot of us do, it's not just an issue of vegans eating non-fair trade tofu, but it's also an issue of rich or middle class Chinese people eating non-fair trade tofu, and rich Chinese workers, rich Chinese businessmen exploiting their workers for very little pay. I think that everyone should try and buy more fair trade products, whether they're Chinese or whether they're British or whatever. I think that we definitely need to try and I think the only thing that we can do in the West really is buy fair trade products, but I think that definitely we could try and push the Chinese government to improve labour laws in China. That would be a possibility as well, but I don't know. I think that veganism is definitely a step in the right direction, because a lot of the soya that is produced, or a lot of the plant-based products which are produced, are fed to animals. It takes 10 times as much food to produce a kilogram of beef than we could just eat ourselves. And so I think that veganism is definitely the first step, but definitely as well we should try and improve labour laws in certain countries, and we should buy more fair trade products as well. So in terms of factory workers being exploited for their work, in the UK, basically it's mainly Polish people being exploited for their work. They're working in a kind of meat factory because they can't find any other job, and they don't have the English skills to get a better job. Now, I think that to be honest, Brexit was brilliant in actually getting rid of this problem. I think that we need very strict rules on who should and should not be allowed in the country. I think that there should be requirements on that you need to have a job to get into the country first, and you need to know a sufficient amount of English in order to get a job. I think that the only reason that people are exploited and that people are paid very little pay to work in factories or to work in slaughterhouses is the fact that they can't find another job and they don't have sufficient English skills to get another job. And so I think if we had very strict rules on immigration, we only let people in who had a job and were able to speak sufficient enough English, we wouldn't have people being exploited for very little pay working in factories. I think that the amount of money someone would earn for working in a factory would increase, because they would have to pay their factory workers more, because it would be not very many people would want those jobs. So yeah.
Our veganism must be intersectional, accessible, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, and decolonized.
Right, so basically the second point is really about intersectionality and how veganism should be feminist and anti-racist and all of these other against all of these other isms. And so I think that this is really, really silly, because it indicates that everyone has to be in line with a particular political ideology to be vegan. Now, one of the things that feminists often promote is they promote being, pro hormonal contraceptions. Now, I think hormonal contraception is really devastating for animals. Hormonal contraception often contains animal ingredients and is tested on animals. And so for me, that's something that is anti-vegan. It's something that goes against veganism. And, I have a clear, coherent argument on how, these hormonal contraceptives harm animals. However, I find when I talk to people who are intersectional vegans, it's really funny because they don't have a coherent argument on how veganism is anti-racist, apart from, oh, well, I don't like racism and I like veganism. It's a very odd argument, and I don't think that those connections, they're not a coherent connection. At least if I say, well, hormonal contraception is against veganism, I can make a coherent connection between taking the contraception and harming animals. I don't think there's a coherent connection between being racist and harming animals. But anyway, thank you for watching, guys. Please subscribe and like this video if you do, and comment down below if you like it.